Oh. Wrong button. Try again. Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 48, with me, your host, John Jordan. And joining me this week is James from Blockchain Gaming.biz. Hello, James. How's it going?
All good, thanks.
Good. So we've not chatted for a while, so it's always good to kind of connect back and see what's going on in the more kind of formal news sense, which there's always news going on, isn't there? So this week I kind of thought we'd go kind of back to basics like we used to do when we started off the podcast, and just go back and have a look at the news this week, rather than talk about any big trends or anything like that. Sometimes I don't think there's any big news this week, actually, but I think there's lots of little news which kind of is interesting to sometimes get down into the weeds with. So for those of you who are listening on the podcast rather than watching on YouTube, I'm just going to open up this week's blockchain gaming news roundup article on blockchaingaming.biz. So let's see what we've got. Okay, so our top news this week, apparently, James, is Gods Unchained has opened its public beta. What do we think about Gods Unchained doing its public beta?
I think it's honestly a really positive step because they've been making a couple of really big changes to their user interface, as well as how easy it is for new and existing users to mess around with their deck setup. I think along with that one too, they included something that was a bit more about level progression, so it allows them to kind of chop and change the kind of card setups that they've got. So they're definitely getting themselves positioned for a lot more replayability, a lot more usability, and also just trying to really streamline the whole thing while ensuring for scale. So I think that's one of the reasons why they were doing this in almost like a closed/phased beta, because they released it to 1,200 existing users to start with, and then they added it for a couple of others that were using a particular kind of wallet, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I think as far as I understand, they've been in closed beta for ages. I think since the end of 2018, or at least the start of 2019, they've had this closed beta going on. And then they kind of announced, it was kind of weird. We were discussing it because they announced a long time ago they were going to do something on the 10th of June. I think it was going to be a closed beta, and they did announce that. Then I was actually on that closed beta, and then pretty much after they started it, they just said they made it open. I don't quite know what the definition of technical definition between open and closed is really. I suppose because kind of if you're doing a closed beta for 1,200 people, there's probably not that many more people who want to play it. So you're not really anyway. By the by, I guess what's interesting. So I'm not a expert or good or particularly actually even very much interested in trading card games, which is obviously what this is. So I played the beta. And I have to say, I was thoroughly confused. As I think you, well, not. I think when you start playing a trading card game, like I did play a bit of Hearthstone, and I played the what was the one that Bethesda did? It was an Elder Scrolls one, wasn't there? I think on mobile anyway. And I just get overwhelmed by all the cards. Are you a trading card player? Do you?
Oh God, no.
No, because they all have different. Yeah, the whole point of the cards is they all have different powers, and it's really hard to learn.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you really invest the time and resources into getting into the rules, it can be something that can be kind of invigorating. Having a different kind of deck lineup, different like skills or elemental abilities, but it's just that I've never really had the patience for doing that with a card game. I say that, and it's a little bit hypocritical because I used to be into MMOs and into strategy games where it's all about learning the rules. But I mean, all in all, I mean, visually speaking, it's quite impressive looking, and good on them for creating something that looks so good and at the same time has a good level of mechanics. They've put a lot of emphasis into making sure there's balance in the kind of cards that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Gods Unchained is a big game for the blockchain sector, partly because they've raised so much money from their prolonged pre-item sale. And as you say, it looks really great. I think it's kind of interesting, I suppose, kind of how you pitch trading card games. So do you kind of go, there's a market who really who really get this, and you kind of go for them, or do you kind of go, well, let's make it a bit lightweight to begin with, and get those kind of people who tried Hearthstone and didn't really stick with it? The interesting thing, obviously, that the other balancing act they've got to do with Gods Unchained is they've got this big esports thing. So the game is designed to be an esport, and that I know behind the scenes on the business side, they're trying to do a lot of deals with esports kind of companies in various forms to kind of create this Gods Unchained esport tournament. So they've got quite a lot of moving parts. They're trying to create a game, which is hard enough, and then they're trying to. It's got to be a game for esports, and then they got all the tournaments, presumably mainly be online, and they got these big prize pools, so that will drive a certain number of users. But I do obviously the more moving parts you add to a project, the harder it becomes to I think balance. And I guess that'll be the interesting thing for me is it's just so ambitious. But it looked great. So, but yeah, I think I were overwhelmed by the amount of cards, which for me is a bit of a warning sign. But anyway, so that was we talked about that a lot. That's only our first bit of news. So it's done its beta. That's good. What other news did we have this week? So we have announced the speakers for Blockchain Gamer Connects in Hong Kong, our conference. What do you make of that? Obviously, we've been heavily involved in this, but for the purposes of the podcast, James, why should people be thinking about going to Blockchain Gamer Connects Hong Kong?
Well, it's mainly because there's such a promising lineup of speakers and panel discussions that we're having at the moment. I mean, we've been very involved in who should be I say who should be, who we'd love to really have coming along to this one, and they include a lot of influential names. I mean, we've got Dylan Jones, who's been at a couple of our events. We've got Gabby Dizon of Alto. We've got John Linden from Mythical Games. I mean, this is coming off the back of a lot of announcements coming from their side, and including those that have been very active within the space. And we've also got Marguerite Courcelle of Blockade Games, and I think there's a couple more that we have kind of hopefully coming along, but at the same time we have to really make sure we got the green tick on those ones. But it promises to be an incredible sort of debut event for Southeast Asia. I mean, which is more amazing because it's a booming space for blockchain.
Yeah, no, I think I'm pretty happy with the lineup. I think it's the best lineup we've had on a blockchain Gamer Connect. We've done how many we've done now? We've done this will be our fourth one, will it? Let's have a think. Yeah, kind of fourth, fifth. And it's definitely some key people I think in the space. You mentioned a few there. I mean, obviously Gabby, very active in the community. We obviously got his game coming out. We'll talk about that a bit later. And John Linden, obviously kind of waiting to see what Mythical Games get up to. They're two I'm really interested to talk to. And Animoca Brands, who are our co-organisers, obviously based in Hong Kong, and it's interesting to talk to those guys doing really well, have their Formula One game. And it also, I think, as we've been kind of trying to put together the schedule, it's been interesting. Obviously, there's people we know we'd like to come, and some of them can't come for various reasons or don't want to come at the moment, don't really think we've got much to talk about. But it's been interesting over the last couple of weeks. We're starting to see, I think, more local interest. So we got I think, quite a decent mix of people from Japan, South Korea, obviously China, Hong Kong as well, coming together, and interesting on the investment side as well. That seems to be coming together as well. So I think it'll be a really good mixture of different people from different kind of companies, kind of globally. So we've got obviously Europeans and the North Americans, but also strong Asian contingent. And I think there's, from the talks we're talking about, I think we're definitely in the right spot. A lot of talk about NFTs and creating economies and creating communities and user experience, all those things that are really kind of coming to the fore at the moment. So yeah, good. So so that's our pitch over. Come along to Hong Kong. 2 days. When is it? The 17th and 18th of July. So about a month away. And continuing now with our industry news. So we had quite a lot of Axie Infinity this week. There's always quite a lot of Axie Infinity, aren't there? Quite busy people. This was news you like. So yeah, to talk about Axie Infinity, and they've done a partnership with Maker.
Yeah, MakerDAO. So they've largely been involved in stablecoin as well as the digital governance. I go back to its stablecoin, its DAI. They'd previously been working alongside, I think it was the experimental team and Crypto Wars. And having spoken to both the Crypto Wars team as well as, I think it was one of the members of the BizDev team for MakerDAO, the intention of their stablecoin is to make it easier for new and existing users to really get onboarded with the game and get involved with the various competitions and community activity that goes on. And I think all in all, I mean, seeing as though Crypto Wars had its first competition, its Crypto Chicks event, and the MakerDAO seemed to go quite well well, it went down quite well with that event. I'm optimistic, well, cautiously optimistic about how they do with Axie Infinity, because it'll be interesting to see how that one goes along. They've got a very active community, and if they're able to really put it through an effective acid test and it comes out like smelling like roses.
You put it through an acid test and it comes out smelling of roses. That's an interesting mixture of metaphors there, James. I like that. Have a light bulb moment. Sorry, I interrupted you. No, I do think it's interesting. I mean, you know more about this than me. I think it's not so interesting the fact that they're giving away DAO for these DAI for these competitions. I think the interesting stuff is how they're are building these collateralized debt positions using NFTs.
That's generally one of the interesting concepts that comes with MakerDAO. I mean, especially with Axie Infinity, because I haven't seen that with Crypto War so much.
Well, I think obviously Crypto Wars isn't live yet, and it doesn't use NFTs in the same way as far as I can see. I don't quite know what the NFT. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't really know enough about Crypto Wars. Well, obviously, Axie has a strong economy and has people are buying and selling Axies for multiple ETH. So you can kind of see how it links in. But it is interesting. I think, and obviously, MakerDAO in general are looking to expand, aren't they? I think what you can collateralize, so not just have ETH being the kind of what you give to get what you put into the loan. So it does kind of make sense. I guess what's interesting is more generally, there's this interesting idea, something we'll talk about in Hong Kong, I hope, is the valuation of NFTs. And there's a lot. I mean, as far as I can see, no one's really done any proper research on that because games haven't got to the stage of having enough data around them or big enough audiences to kind of really prove how these economies can scale. But it is interesting when we start to see stuff like we mentioned it, the Formula One game and that NFT for Formula One Delta Time selling for, I don't remember what it was. It's 416 ETH, which is the biggest. No, it's not the biggest, because there's that crypto kit sold for 600 ETH a while back. But it is interesting when you start to see these things clearly have some sort of value. Quite how you do collateralize, how you would work that into collateralized debt position is way beyond me. But
We'll get out and dig into that one, because I've always been interested in the token economics of these games and just what this really involves from the player's point of view.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We'll just mention, although I have skin in this game, that the B2Expand, the French developer that did Beyond the Void, has announced its new game. So Light Trail Rush. I mean, still very early for that game, with a PC game, a bit like a kind of Wipeout kind of thing going on there, but kind of Wipeout meets kind of Mario Kart, if that makes any sense. With NFTs, that's interesting. I've been working with them a little bit, so I've known about the game for a while, but it's interesting they've finally announced it. So worth checking out that. If you sign up for Light Trail Rush via the website, you can get a concept art NFT, which I'm sure you won't be able to put into a Maker collateralized debt position at any point, but looks nice. Tech-wise, quite a lot going on with tech. Zilliqa. So Zilliqa is not something I know very much about. What's going on with Zilliqa?
Well, over the past 6 months, they've been making a lot of development progress. The latest one being the introduction of smart contracts into their network. So it allows people to make more secure positions and help to honor various things that go on between themselves and other developers. What makes it kind of interesting that these are being introduced is that they seem to be very attentive to ensuring that all of the bugs are kind of picked out of any of these issues. So it makes smart contracts a lot more surgical in their approach, which seems a little bit unusual when you're thinking about smart contracts in general.
I'm just looking at their website. It says Zilliqa Day is 4 days, 7 hours, 38 minutes, and 49 seconds away. I don't know what Zilliqa Day is. Maybe that's is that mainnet going live or something? Or are they not live? I thought they were live already. It must be live if they're putting smart contracts on it. Let's have a look. Zilliqa Day is a second anniversary event. It is a event in Singapore at the Auditorium. Okay, so we're not going to go to Singapore to go to Zilliqa Day, but Zilliqa. I mean, I guess my question for all these in all these kind of new, improved, whatever they want to call themselves, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation blockchains. We've got Ethereum. A lot of people like it. Some people don't, but it's doing what it does at the moment, even without sharding and Casper and all that sort of stuff. And Ethereum 0.2. We've got EOS, doing its own thing, certain ways. Got Tron, which is doing, we've got a few different ones, and we've got kind of IOST again. And there's obviously tons of other ones. I mean, like absolutely tons of different blockchains. It's always amazing how you kind of think you've heard of them all, and another one comes up. I'm just not quite sure. I'm sure it's really good tech-wise, Zilliqa, but I'm not quite sure what who would use it over something else that's already out there. Any thoughts?
I've only seen a little bit of a fringe of that one. I still need to get in contact again with Nedrick of Ethereum on, because I believe that they were originally using Zilliqa as a solution to scalability and transaction costs for their game. I don't know how much they're using it still at this moment in time. That's why I have to kind of touch base with them.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that, because that's why I got confused. I thought Zilliqa was a bit like a Loom, like a layer 2 solution rather than its own blockchain. And I guess the other kind of thing now is, again, I'm probably showing my slightly losing my lack of technical expertise here. But we have things like Cosmos, which is obviously, and Polkadot a bit further off, but those are kind of connectors between blockchains. So I don't know whether that kind of stuff is good for new blockchains, if Zilliqa can become like a little kind of specialist niche in a certain sort of thing, and then be connected to other blockchains via like a Cosmos thing. I don't know if that's, I assume it's possible. I don't know whether it would be, but I just kind of worry with all these new blockchains that at the moment there's only so many developers. There's only ever so many developers out there. No matter how much money you throw at them, if you've only got a few dapps running on it, doesn't matter if you've got a super fast blockchain and no dapps running on it. It doesn't really make any odds. So I just kind of wonder, and we've kind of seen this, I guess, a little bit back in the day. I spoke to the guys at POA Network, which is sort of a similar sort of thing. I know they're a bit closer to Ethereum, but it just seems to be lots of clever people and haven't quite thought through who's actually going to use this stuff they're making. But good luck to them. I'm sure they know more about it than me. Let's crack on. What other news have we got? Okay, yeah, I can't remember if this was this week or last week. Actually, it may have been the end of last week. So Loom's integrated with Tron. Talking of more blockchains. So what are your views on Tron at the moment? Tron's, I guess, is still the most controversial blockchain with the working of Mr. Justin Sun.
Yeah, and he's meeting with Warren Buffett.
The man has ambition. You can't you can't knock that. He knows how to be trending on Twitter.
Exactly. That is certainly one way I can't really knock them at all. They seem to have the market cornered when it comes to being able to make a meme of themselves and get on social media traffic quite a lot. I mean, in terms of their sort of approach towards the gaming space, there's still few and far between of like meaningful titles that we would really get involved with. I mean, one of them was the integration of like BitGuild's various like dapps.
Yeah, what's that called? BitGuild's one is called Tron Trade, isn't it? It's a extension. No, not extension. A exchange. Sorry.
Yeah, they're generally using that one in order to allow users to have a bit more of a flexible approaches to the kind of tokens that they can buy, sell, and get onto Tron in general. But I mean, along with that one too, there's still a massive like split between the kind of genre or types of games that are available on Tron, and this is kind of why I'm reserved in my like positive affirmations of Tron in general.
I kind of vacillated really with skepticism about Tron. I mean, I did use it for a bit. So I got the actually the Guild. Can't remember what it's called. The Guild wallet. Have I got it somewhere? Have I got it? No, I haven't got it. Extension on the. It's called Guild wallet. So I do have about $10 of Tron, I think. And it's kind of interesting. So there's not really, as you say, many games at the moment. Although Hypersnakes has done really well on Tron. So I've not really used it very much in the way that I kind of use Ethereum a lot and use EOS a bit. But what is interesting, I'm looking at the dapp radar rankings at the moment, and if you look at users in the last 24 hours, Tron Bet is at number 2. Obviously, it's a gambling app, lots of gambling on Tron. But then Hypersnakes is a game, that's at number 5, and then TRX Market is an exchange, that's number 7. So in the top 10, Tron has 3 dapps, and they're all in the different categories. So it's not just gambling on Tron. Actually, EOS is still very heavily gambling focused. But Tron actually, I wouldn't say it's matured, but it has different apps on there, which is kind of interesting. And I do kind of think sometimes, whatever Justin Sun gets up to is, in a way, is kind of masking that actually some developers are actually using Tron, which is, I think it's very easy to write it off and just say, well, it's a bit of a joke. And obviously there's issues with the CTO left, didn't he, or there's some sort of lawsuit going on there. Or there's obviously, behind the scenes, there's some interesting stuff in terms of the people and how they build a company around that, which is maybe not as mature as some of the other blockchains. But people are using it. So
Exactly, yeah. I mean, for the kind of metrics that they have, like transaction speed, scale that they offer, I mean, it's an interesting project. It's just,
sorry, I interrupt you. You go ahead.
oh yeah, I mean, even with those statistics in mind, it's an interesting project. It's just, again, I've maybe got to try and dig into those titles that are available on Tron at the moment and see what they're like. But I mean, I think we've had previous experience with Tron snakes in the past. I remember meeting the dev team when they were first alluding to that project as well back in January.
I have to say, I'm looking at the Tron rankings, just the dapps on Tron now, and it is in the top. I've got the top 20 up here, I think. Oh no, yes, even more than that. Top, no, all the way down to top 50. But certainly in the top 20, basically there's 3 exchanges, 1 game, and the rest is gambling. So it is still heavily focused on gambling, but it does work. And I guess if something works, people try stuff out on it. And there's, I've vacillated in a more positive sense towards Tron at the moment. I may I may go back in a few weeks' time. But there we go. Okay, so we didn't talk about Loom Network really integrating with Tron. I guess that's kind of almost doing this sort of Cosmos Polkadot thing on a lower level, connecting these blockchains, which is kind of interesting. We won't talk about that anymore. Okay, so what are we up to? 20 minutes. Let's make quickly run through some games. So we mentioned it before. Bitizens. Bitizens was going to be a big game from Bit Guild. Looks like that's over now.
Yeah, so what they've decided to do is, in their announcement, is they've decided to indefinitely shelve the project, or at least for a foreseeable time, while they pivot towards those projects that are more, well, they're saying that it's in order to go towards projects that ensure a greater level of mass adoption. So they're shifting their focus towards the Tron wallet, to the Guild wallet, Guild chat. And I mean, my honest thinking is that, I mean, while its ICO back in the past did relatively okay, I mean, it's Bitizens, I don't know whether or not it had the same kind of positive reception, because its Pioneer's sale back in the day got rescheduled a couple of times, didn't it? While they made a couple of changes to mechanics.
I mean, I think this just kind of shows Bit Guild. I think are an interesting example, partly because we had a lot of contact with them off and on, but it shows the kind of the issues around blockchain, which is not necessarily the blockchain, but it got its ICO just through the kind of the start of 2018, when ICOs were just beginning to kind of fall away. So it raised its money. It was then going to be it was an Ethereum platform, or platform for Ethereum games, which it launched. It launched games on it. It wasn't. I wouldn't say there's a vast amount of users, but not a vast amount of users in the space at the moment, anyway. Yeah, and then Bitizens was this big thing. I as much as you could play it, I created an avatar, and I didn't participate in this sale that's being refunded. But it just seemed like that was going to be a big game. And then obviously switching to Tron was a big kind of deal for them. They had to rework all their tech, I suppose. And then I think they just realised that. I mean, I remember we did the podcast when Guild Chat had just launched. It was just this crazy sort of thing. I think they've just kind of realised it's probably a bit early still for games in terms of getting big scale. I think they had, at one point, I can't remember the announcement now, I think they had like tens of thousands of people anywhere on Guild Chat, didn't they? And I think they just kind of realised it's a bit easier to get users at that point. And the Guild wallet, as much as I've used it, is like a MetaMask thing for Tron. That works really well. Tron Trade I've not used, their exchange, but it just seems to focus on those at the moment, which are already working, kind of makes sense. Whereas you're kind of potentially spending a lot of time and money trying to build a game, and it was going to be a pretty featured pretty not complex, but it was going to be a big game. It wasn't just what we might consider like a simple dapp. At least that was my impression of it. So it kind of makes sense to me. And I think it just, to a degree, just kind of shows how hard this kind of stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. One of the reasons that they had so much success with Guild Chat in particular is that They had a lot of extra social media press going on about it. They were discussing it a lot more, and they were using their position as a validator within the TRON network to actually incentivize people to get involved with periodic airdrops. And granted, while that ended up being an absolute ton in circulation of like faux coins, as we can always call them, it still generated a lot of traction. It's something that they've allowed them to really fine tune it, sharpen it up, and actually make it usable for a broader audience. And the same can't be said of something like Bitizens or even their older token, their Plat.
Well, their Plat's become what's it called, a TRC, yes. So their Plat has been transitioned as a TRC 20 token. Actually, I had about, I can't remember how much I had actually. I had about $10 of, I always buy $10 of these tokens just to see, and I actually transitioned it over to, and actually that was pretty easy, I have to say. So that was a good tech transition. But yeah, I don't quite know. Yeah, the roadmap for Plat, I'm not quite sure about. And very quickly, I'll just mention it. 0x Racers is a new game coming out from the 0x Universe people. We don't talk about 0x Universe. I've not actually played it at all, I don't think, which I probably should do. Because that's doing quite well in terms of users at the moment on Ethereum. And the final thing is to quickly talk about, because it's a big project coming soon, Decentraland. So Decentraland is really building up to some sort of launch. I don't know if it's an open beta or a closed beta, going back to what we talked about at the beginning. But in Decentraland, it's kind of interesting that we've got this NFT. It's like a what would you call it? Like a way of showing off your NFTs, or what are we?
Oh, the frame system for So they've integrated a couple of games for that one. So I think it's Blockchain Cuties, Crypto Kitties. I don't know if it's My Crypto Heroes as well, including I think Blockchain Cuties have released a series of Decentraland exclusive NFTs for their title as well. So you can dress up your guy in like a special like helmet, shirt, and blueprints for Blockchain Universe. It's an interesting one, honestly. I wonder how many people are going to be showing that sort of stuff off in their future SDK builds.
I mean, it's something that is kind of, I think, kind of creeping in, this kind of idea of, you have these NFTs which may have value, as we kind of discussed, or may not have value. And at the moment, you just have them in your wallet, so it's kind of hard to kind of show them off. And the whole point of Decentraland, I guess, is like a Second Life type virtual environment that people will move around in and then have other experiences. So obviously, I think there'll be games to play in there, I guess other things as well. But to have it as, I guess, you have a house and you have a room in your house where you can show off your NFTs. I know Terra Virtua I think about something similar. They announced something with Wax, didn't they, quite a while ago. So I think it does kind of make sense that you have a virtual world and then you show off your virtual things. And I guess at some point we'll get to the stage where these, maybe not CryptoKitties, but some of these things will be animated. Maybe CryptoKitties will be animated, I don't know. I mean, there's now 3D CryptoKitties, aren't there, in Mega Crypto, what is it, Mega Cryptopolis? So yeah, so some interesting, I guess, interoperability, low-level interoperability, not really game interoperability, but going in the right direction.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot more item interoperability between games, which is kind of a positive step, I would say. Gives a lot more incentive to the player to actually get involved with some of these things.
I think what will be interesting is that obviously with all these things there is the technical solution to allow interoperability between games or between whatever thing, blockchain experiences, whatever we want to call them, products, and then whether anyone actually uses them. And presumably what will happen is some people will use some small subset of the optionality that's there. So I imagine, because they are the kind of people who do that the Axie Infinity people will be any blockchain kind of experience product, world like Decentraland. They'll be populated by loads of Axie Infinity, by loads of Axies, because the Axie community just loves showing off its Axies. Whereas other games, maybe like the My Crypto Heroes, more pixely kind of stuff, the audience just won't be interested. They're just interested in their game. They don't really care about showing it off. So it'd be a small subset, I suppose. But I guess this is, for me, this is what's interesting about blockchain, is at the moment no one knows what's going to happen. I mean, you could kind of try and be sensible and think about how people use products, but the point of blockchain is, maybe you could incentivize people in certain ways. If you say you bring your My Crypto Hero character into this environment and something amazing happens, it's kind of all up for grabs. And I still think that's the thing that's really exciting about the space. It's still small, but there's just, and I think probably something I've tried to get across in this kind of podcast this week, where there's no really big news, But when you delve into all these bits of news, there's quite a lot going on with all of it. There's over the whole space. It's hard to kind of get it into a single podcast. Just how much activity is happening, and this is just what we know about. I think there's loads of stuff going on that we are not privy to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that doesn't even go into the sort of various projects that are still, even for the blockchain space, still in their very nascent early stages. And it's been kind of remarkable where we've seen a couple of trends that we previously thought would not really catch on last year, like multiple chain integration with a couple of titles, where we thought that would be kind of a niche thing. It's suddenly become increasingly more likely for games to do that. And even then, we still don't know what is the best kind of solution for these titles going forward and what's going to bring about mass adoption. And even by last year's standards, conservative estimates for what is going to really allow blockchain games to break into the mainstream have become a lot more liberalized over time.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. That's the thing everyone still looking for is scale. That's been the thing that's been pretty apparent is how can you get scale, and that's really the thing that's still lacking. So if you want to be a bit more pessimistic about it, we haven't seen the first blockchain game with 10,000 DAUs, and obviously there's this bet going on between, I can't remember who is it. It's I can't remember. That's embarrassing. In a podcast, there is a bet going on anyway between two people, one of whom hates Ethereum and the other whom was part of consensus about how many dapps will have a certain number of users. I think it's 100,000 users, 10,000 users. I can't think it's 10,000 users. Anyway, I'll put a link into the show notes. I think there is an interesting debate around scale and audience, which maybe throws a bit of damp water over my enthusiasm. But maybe that's a podcast for another time. Cool. Thanks so much, James. We're over half an hour, so we're obviously quite keen to talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure as always.
Cool, good. And thank you, listeners, and those of you on YouTube watchers as well. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube, Blockchain Gaming World on YouTube, and obviously the podcast through your favourite podcast provider. If you have any comments, let me know on Twitter. I'm Blockchain GMG. But thanks for listening to this one. Come back next week and find out what's still going on in the world of blockchain games.